Hello, everybody, and welcome. We are super excited to have you here today. First of all, my name's Tyler Crumpler. I'm on the marketing team here at Instruqt. So I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm going to be looking at the questions, doing all that good stuff in the back end, as well as driving the slides and, helping Raphaël guide this conversation. I think we can go ahead and kick it off. Raphaël, if you want to give yourself a quick little introduction.
Sure. So my name is Raphaël Pinson, and I'm currently a senior technical marketing engineer working at Isovalent. So I work on Cilium, Tetragon, eBPF, currently at Cisco because Isovalent was acquired by Cisco a few months ago.
Congratulations on that. That's awesome. We're super excited for y'all. Great family to be a part of. So, okay, cool deal. And so with that, we're going to go into the agenda here. So just really quick, we're going to do a very high level about Instruqt and Isovalent. And then we're going to get into the strategies of implementing gamification. This is a really cool area that we're going to spend a good amount of time on. Some frameworks and for extending existing content. Isovalent are pros at this. Like, they really are some of the best. So excited for you to hear that. Get into some of the best practices of course authoring at scale. Again, pros at this. And within that, we're going to do a little bit of a live demo where we're showing you some of their gamification. Raphael's actually going to show you some of the Gen AI prompts he's done, and we're going to see the evolution of some of these things he's done with Gen AI. So really excited for you all to get into that. And then again, like I said at the end, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A for you all, but please go ahead and make sure that, you're dropping those questions in as they come up, because we'll do our best, like I said. So with that, really quickly, let's just talk about, who is Instruqt. So if you're not familiar with us, we are a flexible hands-on lab experience for training workshops and go-to-market teams. So that's a fancy way of saying we allow you to create content for technical learners to really get that out there. If you need to show people how to use your software and how to really get in there and build, we're for that. So sales engineers using us for their demos and proof of concepts when they're working with prospects, marketing and product managers using us for lead gen on their website, to create demos on their website, to lead workshops and trainings at live events. And then, technical educators, that bread and butter around, DevRels, technical marketers who are creating these amazing programs like Raphael has for self-paced training and gamification and all of that great stuff. We're headquartered out of Amsterdam, but then we have people all over the globe, largely in North America. So very happy to be a part of here. I've been here for about 6 months. Then with that, we'll let Raphael talk a little bit about Isovalent here.
Yeah, so Isovalent is the company that created Cilium and co-created eBPF. So we're doing networking and security currently at Cisco now, working on networking on the side of Cilium as well as security. So networking security and runtime security with Tetragon, specifically using eBPF, so kernel programming the safe way, pretty much.
Nice. Love to hear that. And, just proof of the value you're providing your customers, just got acquired. So that's a great proof point in itself right there. So again, congrats.
Usually a good sign.
Yeah, usually a good sign that you're doing something right. And so, within that, looking at your labs and where these have come from, right? We've been working with you all since I believe like 2021, been around for a long time. I'm pretty sure the Isovalent Instruqt relationship actually predates both of us in our times here, which is really cool. And we can talk a little bit about that. But, your labs have come a long way, and we're going to talk about that progression a little bit here and the evolutions of your labs. But, just right here, maybe using this slide of this, beautiful lab platform and lab area that you've created on your website, I want to talk a little bit about like what your day-to-day looks like and how you've created this before we jump into the evolution of your labs.
Yeah, I actually joined Isovalent a little bit over 2 years ago as a solutions architect. So I was on the customer success side. And Instruqt was already used. It was introduced by the one who's now my manager, Roland Walters. And there was one lab that was in production at the time. And when I joined in customer success, we had like tutorials to explain how to use the features and demo the features that we have both on the enterprise side and on the OSS side. But these features are pretty hard to demonstrate because usually you need a Kubernetes cluster. You need to make sure you have the right version of the kernel. You need to make sure Cilium is installed with the right options. And on the enterprise side, you even need to have access to the enterprise distribution for that. So I started playing with the Instruqt platform. I was actually familiar with Katacoda at the time, so
Okay.
it was quite similar, but I was quite surprised to see like quite a few more features than on Katacoda actually, and started building the labs. Essentially, I took the tutorials that we had and turned them into labs, and as it went, I added more details, more guidance for users, split things into challenges, and eventually it grew into what it is today. So lots of labs on lots of different features. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, not to toot your horn, but like you guys are really pushing the bounds of how to use Instruqt, right? Like after, having multiple conversations with you, it's really cool to see that. So I'm glad to hear you've been able to find like, ways to evolutionize with that. But, it's really cool. We're about to show the journey that Raphaël and Isovalent have been on right here. So if you look, going back just to 2021, right? Like you had your first 2 labs coming in there, getting started with Cilium and network policies, right? You just talked about how hard it is to set up those environments correctly for you all, right? And so I assume part of the value you saw was that, with getting started with Cilium, you could just kind of set up that environment for someone, right?
Yeah, and reuse it. So this was part of the learning, right? Over the years, is originally we had like one stable VM and one staging VM, and eventually I started like having version VMs, version images, and then having one base image for all the labs and making it evolve to have all the scripts I needed, all the setup. So I know that when I need a new lab, I can just reuse this to build on top of it. So the environment is already here. I know that it works for one feature. It's likely to be easy to set it up for another feature.
Nice. And so, I mean, that really basically allows you to scale, right? You don't have to do that setup every time. It's there, it's going to work, and you can feel confident in it. That's great. So then, fast forward, let's go through one more year. We're at 2022. And man, 16 labs in a year. You really grew that thing out pretty fast. Went from 150 plays to 6,000 plus, and you started doing badging. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like that's cool, like the badging stuff. And I know we have a whole slew to talk here, so let's not go too deep. But nice. Why did you guys start doing badges, I guess, at the end of the day?
I guess there's different reasons. One was to play with the idea that people were taking the labs but not necessarily finishing them. So adding badges is definitely like kind of an encouragement to finish and go all the way to the end of the lab. It also, I mean, from the marketing perspective, it's also a good excuse, of course, to get people's information and say, hey, you want a badge? You need to give me your address, because otherwise I can't send you the badge. That's just how it works with Credly. Yeah. And the other thing is really setting ourselves as the authority in terms of the technology, especially on social media. We gave Cilium as an open source project, and then we gave it to the CNCF, which means that we don't own Cilium anymore, but we're still the main contributor, and we're still we're hoping to still be the company that is the reference in terms of expertise on eBPF and Cilium. And so giving badges, giving some kind of credentials for finishing the labs and putting the name of the company on it shows that we're the reference in terms of that technology.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, when we talk about labs and training, right? And honestly, even a little bit of your career and what we talked about here, a lot of times this is about, building out your career in a lot of ways, right? Like if you're a developer and you're going in and learning this, you have a reason. You're not just doing it for fun. Maybe you are. Maybe there's a few people, but most people, you're going all the way to get that badge, right? You're trying to get better at something in your day-to-day. You're trying to solve a problem that you have. And, showing that badge on your LinkedIn is always a great thing. And so to your point, it really incentivizes that. And I think it plays nicely into looking at 2023 here, where, all right, we're talking, you've added 10 more labs. I mean, over 4x your plays at this point, 6,000 badges. So talking about that from the marketing side, where you created your own job, right? You went in, you were on CS, and it became very quick. This was a marketing thing. You were doing this. Now you've got 6,000 badges. Like even just looking at that from a, ROI perspective, a metrics perspective, it's probably 6,000 people's names you got in your database who are now certified using Cilium. That's pretty valuable to Isovalent, right? So let's talk a little bit about 2023.
Yeah. So we actually started the badges in December 2022. And what I had been doing is I had been getting ready for the badges since July 2022. So I had the data of all the people that had finished the labs, and I started adding exams, because one of the conditions for us for the badges was that there had to be a challenge. There had to be like a practical challenge to make sure people had not actually just followed the course, the lab, but actually understood what it was about. So they had to solve something, and then they would get the badge. So we had names dating from back to July of the people that had finished the labs with exams already. And so in December, I actually took all these names and started giving badges to a few hundred people. That was like the Christmas present.
Yeah.
And then from then on, I started taking all the labs that we had. So like the 16 labs we had, I think we had 2 or 3 that had exams, and adding exams to them gradually. And now I think the vast majority of our labs have exams, not all of them, but the vast majority of them have. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really, really cool. And I love to hear that. And what a great story. And I mean, like I said, that's just an amazing growth. And then we get 2024 to date, right? You're at 33 labs already, 27,000 plus plays. We're halfway through the year, and you're already about to surpass 2023 on that side, right? 6,500 badges issued and counting. You've already surpassed last year's badge count. So like clearly badges are picking up. Badges are working for you all, right?
Yeah. And things we started doing in 2023 as well was linking this to events. So there's like 2 events that are linked here, in particular the Security Summer School. So the idea was to have like online workshops where we run the labs, and some people are totally okay taking the labs on their own, and they can. And other people feel like they need some guidance. So we have like workshops where one of us, me or one of my colleagues, will run through a lab, and people can follow through. And at the end, we just give them a few hints to help with the exam, but they're on their own to finish the lab and get the badge. Yeah. And what we started in 2024 is actually bringing this workshop logic to conferences, to the booth. And I think you'll have a slide on this later.
Oh, we do. And, we see you at KubeCon every year. We love what you're doing there. It's got 2 mentions in there. So I think it'll be great to talk a little bit about that. But actually, we've got a question here from Umar, which actually goes perfectly into something we talked about when we were, going through the dry run on this. And, 33 labs, like that's not a small number. That's a lot, right? And one of the things that you mentioned is like, as you're constantly releasing new features, it becomes really hard with repeatable code, keeping that up to date, making sure that everything is right. But then you want to balance that with like, all right, I don't want to train someone on something that's old, but I also don't want to build this super long, not bite-sized lab that someone falls off on, right? So, how do you really manage the need for repeatable code across tracks? How do you make sure you manage quality with quantity over all of those great things, right?
So at the moment, repeatable code is not super easy at the moment, because indeed the scripts are specific to every track. So what we've done is put as much as possible into the image. So we have one base image that we bake, and typically for services, even things running on Kubernetes, for example, I've typically made like systemd services that apply Kubernetes manifest. And so I have all the services that I need with the parameters that I need. I can pass as environment variables or config files. And then in every track, I will pass the parameters that I want, typically as environment variables, to control the way the image behaves. But I will release different version of the base image so that everything is in the base image. Yeah. In some cases, I have like a binary, a Go binary that I made to set up some things in the tracks. These are for like specific features, like being able to restore a user session or find out if the user already has the badge, things like this. There's a little helper that is written and communicates with the APIs, and this is built as a binary that is actually installed in the base image.
Nice. And that makes sense. So really, at the end of the day, it's a lot of automation, right? And automating what you can to really make it as easy as you possibly can for yourself. Makes a lot of sense. All right, we got one more question here from Nick before we move on to the next bit of content. But, Raphaël, you've created a ton of labs, so I imagine you have a pretty good opinion on this. Like, what's a good duration for a lab that you think for seeing people actually finish it? And obviously, there's a lot more that goes into that than just duration. It's the content, it's the flow, it's the gamification. But curious what your thought is there.
This is a hard one. This is really a hard one. And we have labs of different durations. Our feature labs are typically 1 to 2 hours long.
Okay.
We have some discovery labs that are meant to be a quarter to 20 minutes long, typically for conferences, so people can do it at the booth. I think for the type of features that we have, shorter than this is too hard because there's a lot of explanations that go with the features. I've seen people complain that labs were long, and the problem is usually that we put a limit to it. We make the lab expire, so we have there's a possibility in Instruqt to actually allow people to add half an hour, for example.
Yeah.
So we try to find a good balance between the price that we will pay for each lab run and the flexibility that people can have. I find that usually people say, hey, this lab is long, it's 1 to 2 hours. The thing I've started doing is actually telling them in the beginning, this lab will last roughly an hour and a half. People usually don't mind spending an hour and a half on a lab if they know that it will happen.
Yeah.
Usually what they are not too happy with is if they start a lab, they expect it will last 5 minutes, and then they find out in the middle that no, they've already done half of it, but it's still going to be an hour long. Yep. Which is also why I've worked on allowing people to restore their session, because sometimes their session expires, but I've told them in the beginning, if it expires, it's okay. You can restart the lab and you'll be able to get back to the challenge where you stopped.
Yeah.
The frustrating thing is really this. People getting to the exam, they get stuck in the exam, they have 5 minutes left, and then boom, it expires, and they're like, oh no, I have to redo the whole. That's the hard part.
So it's about setting that expectation at the beginning, and it makes a lot of sense. I know I said one more question on this before we move forward, but this is another just really good one, and it should be quick. So, what LMS are you integrating with today, Raphaël?
Sorry?
What LMS are you integrating with today?
At the moment, none. I've tried different LMSs last year, and the only benefit I saw to LMS, since I put all the content in Instruqt, so we have some videos in the intro, we have the whole explanation, the images and so on, everything's in Instruqt. The only benefit I see to LMS is actually tying it together into a course. So adding slides, I don't see the value in this, and we don't make people pay for the labs at this point. So I didn't see the value that I would get in an LMS at this point, except just linking the labs together, which is what I've tried to do with the map that we'll see later.
Yeah, and the reason I really wanted to hit on that one, because we talked about this as well earlier, that's such a different mindset than I hear a lot of people take. A lot of times when we're entering conversations about Instruqt, or I'm at a conference and I'm talking to someone, well, we don't have an LMS yet, so we're not quite ready for you. But I mean, you can see from the scale that you all have done here that that's not the end all be all. We love LMSs over here at Instruqt. I'm not saying that at all, but it's not an and or if then that. And I think you guys do a great job of showing that. So appreciate you adding some light there. So with that, this is probably the meatiest section. I know you and I went way over talking about this, so really excited for everyone to see it. Strategies to implementing gamification. This is going to be a fun one here. So with that, this is kind of looking at y'all's resource library here, right? And so you have lots of labs. We talked about this, right? You really have lots and lots and lots of labs. And one of the issues that I think you shared with me that you saw is that with all these labs, someone would take a lab and then they didn't know what to do next, right? So let's talk about kind of how your journey went of, figuring that out and what you did for people to really get them where they needed to go.
Yeah, so at some point we had I think 10, 15 labs, and we didn't have, now we have some filtering on the page. We didn't have that at the time. We started thinking of what was the best way for people to find the content they were looking for. And what we started thinking about was having some persona. And because we have this little bee at Isovalent that is linked to the identity of the Cilium project as well, we came up with this 5 persona, essentially. There's 3 that we use mainly, so platform, cloud, network, and SecOps. And with this persona, we gave a recommendation, a list of labs that would be recommended. It's not, you don't have to take them in order. It's more hey, if you're into platform, if you're more on the, a Kubernetes engineer, typically, you should probably do these labs more or less in this order. This will be most useful to you. And then as you take the labs, maybe there'll be recommendations on where to go next. But then as the number of labs kept growing, what happened is I started trying to understand how the recommendations played in terms of the different paths that could be taken. So I started making a table of them. And I looked at the table and I'm like, hey, this is starting to look like a map. So it started looking like a map with different areas. I think you have this in the next slide, right?
I do.
And so I had an observability area where we had one lab that was the connectivity visibility lab. And then there was like a pure networking area, like a security area, mesh area. And I'm like, yeah, it would be fun to actually try and organize this as a map, and you could like travel through the map. So I spent the next few days actually trying to position the labs properly so that the paths would not cross too much in a way that would make sense, right? To travel the map. And eventually started working on making it look nice if possible.
Yeah. But it makes a lot of sense, right? Like when you started to really map it out into what makes sense for your users and your customers, you're like, okay, we have personas. How do we map that out? Oh, wow, there's a little bit of intersection here. And then voila, gamification is born, right? You see this
exactly
building it and you're just like, this makes so much sense. And I just really love this first iteration of the map you have, especially as you guys are about to see, this is going to be our first little plug in AI and some of the things that Raphael's done with it. Really cool. So hopping forward to the next one, just like looking at this video, this is the first map that I believe you actually created using Gen AI, correct?
Yeah, so that was with Midjourney a year ago.
Yeah.
And
so
it was
talking about that, just really quick, I want to call this out. Midjourney a year ago, how many of you guys were thinking about Gen AI in your workload or day-to-day work a year ago? Like, it's really impressive that you were that cutting edge on it. But yeah, keep going. I just love that. It's very cool.
So it was kind of fun. I started playing with Midjourney about 2 years ago, and a year ago they added the possibility to pan out. So you can create a base image, and then you can pan on the side. So essentially, you can see where there's the cursor here. That's the first island I created, and then I asked Midjourney to create another small island on the top, and then another island on the left, and then another island on the right, and then essentially created the images by panning out on the sides like this. Yeah. And every time I give different instructions to have like the castles on the right side because it's security, and maybe different details on each side.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things when we're talking about Gen AI and course creation and content creation, right? Is like, how long do you think this would have taken you is if you had to, go from this first map this first map right here, get this idea out to a designer, a web partner, all of these people to build this and get that idea out there versus how long did it actually take you to just create this using?
Fun thing. I still hope that one day our designer will work on this. I talked with him because I love what he does, and we had this idea of doing something a little bit more. I wouldn't say simplistic, but at least more like vector kind of approach, and maybe with animations and so on. And he loved the idea, and he said to me, I'd love to do this, but it will take all my time. Yeah, I'm not going to do anything else, so I'll have to say no.
Well, that's very interesting, right? Like, people are always going to be the final touch. It's not people that are going to be replaced by AI. It's AI enabling people that will replace that eventually. So it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, and then so talking about that, he said it'd take all his time. How long did this take in reality for you to get your V1 up?
Oh, there were a lot of iterations to get to where I wanted. I think I probably spent more time on the next versions because for the next versions, Midjourney improved in terms of resolution, in terms of the pixels you could get, in terms of the artifacts, the quality of the artifacts you could get. And the challenge was to make new versions of the islands in the same style so that people wouldn't notice too much that it had changed. But keeping the same kind of idea. So I probably spend more time on the next versions, actually trying to redo the map, keeping the styling, but improving on it. But probably in total in the last year, I probably spent a few days on it, something like this. It's not a matter of weeks.
Yeah, it's far less than a designer's time to get through all these iterations, right? Like, that's at the end of the day, and it's beautiful. And you can see how far this has come. And I know that there's other iterations in between here, and there's going to continue to be more as this thing continues to evolve. But, when you look at where you've gotten this thing to, it's really cool. I would love if you could just, maybe for a minute, talk to everybody a little bit about what Cilium is and tell them a little bit more about this map outside of the Gen AI pieces and stuff like that. So.
All right, so the Cilium project is a CNI project. So CNI is a network plugin for Kubernetes, first and foremost. So it provides networking for Kubernetes, and now it's going beyond Kubernetes. We're starting to use Cilium as a standalone load balancer and for needs outside of Kubernetes to link different workloads in cloud environments, for example, as well. And besides that, the sub-projects, this Hubble that provides observability, in the context of Cilium and Kubernetes.
Yep.
There's features like cluster mesh, and there's the Tetragon project that provides runtime observability and security. And so this goes into observability, it goes into security, and goes into networking like BGP, IPAM, and so on. And it goes into security like network policies, host firewall, runtime security, and so on. So there's lots of different topics. Each of the dots right now on the map. So the bronze ones are introductions. The silver ones are feature labs, and the gold ones are more like advanced labs that are integration with other products like Grafana, for example, to show what can be done when you take the features and you put them together. And then there's the green ones that are the discovery ones that I added last year to have a quick overview of the features.
Yeah, no, it's just so cool to see how this thing has evolved and how you have really built out like this world around your training that clearly people love by the number of badges you're giving out, right? And incentivizing people. We're going to talk about that here a little bit on the next slide, which I think is really cool. So one of the things that when you really start to look at this is, the keys to making learning fun. And I think that is so important with gamification. At the end of the day, people want to win, right? Like that's why they do this. They also want to learn, but like you said, you were seeing drop off. And so this incentivized people to really finish things. And so, you want to talk us through a little bit about this. And I think even talking about like your bingo card that you use at conferences would be really cool to talk about as well.
Yeah, I'll be honest. To me, gamification is just acknowledging the fact that our brains work this way. And I'm fine doing it with my own brain. If my brain is happy working with some kind of gratification, let's just use it. Let's just hack our brains. That's perfectly fine. Give it something to get going. So yeah, we started with the learning tracks, with the path based on personas, and then we added the badges. The fun thing is because the Cilium and the Isovalent logos use a hexagon. From the start, I wanted badges that were hexagonal so they could tile, so you could put them together. And it was the idea from the start that I would print them actually. So I have printed versions. I have some here, printed versions on stickers that use like metallic stickers, so that we can distribute to the people that finish the labs. Very cool. So when I see people at conferences, I can check their Credly accounts, see which badges they've gotten, and give them the stickers that go with them. And where we started doing the last touch to compare it was actually we made a little collector, a little book that shows the different badges you can get, and people can stick the stickers on them. And the really fun thing is that I'm seeing people coming to the booth, and I'm like, hey, do you want to stick a book? And they're like, well, what am I? Am I a kid? And then they think for a second, and like, yeah, give me one.
They're like, wait a minute, that sounds fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fun thing as well is that with the book, when you get the stickers, you put the stickers on the book, and you can see which labs you haven't done. So you can measure what you still have to learn based on this in a fun way.
I love that. People really do love that, though. Like, you think about it, and it's like, oh, man, it's like being at Disney with my kid again and them getting all these little pins. And you're like, wait, I want to get them all. I want to do this. So it really...
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the best comments I've seen on LinkedIn over the last few years on what we've done is someone saying you have to give it to that team that they made something as boring as Cilium technology something fun to do. Like, well,
like, yeah, a little bit of a double-sided compliment there, but you're like, I'll take it.
I mean,
enjoyed it. Yeah.
I'll take it. I don't think networking is much fun most of the time, but you add a little bit of Star Wars, you add some gamification, it actually helps.
Yeah, Star Wars never hurts. So really, when you're looking at this, right, you've got daily leaderboards and prizes, role-based, so making it super relevant to people so they know exactly where they need to be going and what tracks they need to take within that gamification. And then the reward piece, right? Like, hey, you actually won this. Here's your sticker. It's tangible. You can put this on your LinkedIn, use that on your resume, all of these great things. And so at the end of the day, it's that whole package that makes gamification work, right?
And let's be honest, there's different benefits for us as marketing. There's a benefit that that people will actually be willing to learn more because they're getting a reward from it. And there's also a benefit that they're more likely to share about the technology if they get a reward. If they get an email from Credly, they get a badge, they're more likely to share it on social and say, hey, I did this lab, this was super great, you should do it as well. And this is invaluable when someone else than your own marketing team is actually vouching for what you do.
So. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and it's funny that you say that. This is going to be a little bit of a side tangent, but that's actually a huge reason of why I ended up at Instruqt. I'm a marketer. I was at an open source company before this, and I literally saw Instruqt Labs because we were doing all these trainings over Zoom, and I was like, where was this for me when I was doing this as a marketer, right? Like it was just an immediate solved a problem for me. And so, no, it does speak a lot when, you have people seeing that. And obviously,
what I like to say in the last few months, in a way, is this is like an ever-going workshop.
Yeah.
The idea is making it as fun and engaging as a workshop, if possible, but without having the need to have an engineer that's constantly here to oversee it.
For sure. No, it makes a lot of sense. All right, cool deal. Let's push on through here now to the frameworks for extending content. So I think this is a really good one. And Isovalent, you guys really do a good job of making sure it's not just like a one and done with most of your content that you're creating, right? And so a lot of that is bringing virtual labs into the real world. So do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what y'all are doing on the in-person side and the self-paced learning side?
Yeah, so we're using it in different ways. The idea really is all the labs can be consumed self-paced. There's a few exceptions that are not public at this point, either for customer training or because they're too complex at this point. Like typically cloud-based labs that take like 40 minutes to start. But yeah, we've been, for the last 2 years, we've been using the labs as a base to replace the in-person workshops. We used to have, like 3 years ago, we had like a monthly workshop where people could join and see how to install Cilium and do it in their own cluster. And we stopped doing this after the lab started taking off. We were like, hey, you want to learn, just do one of the labs. This is just much easier, less time consuming. And then we started doing physical workshops. So what we did is we worked with our network of partners, and we organized workshops that were the location was organized by the partners. They would invite their customers, and then we bring one of our engineers and run through. Originally, it was run through one or two labs, but as I introduced the map last year, what I started doing is just what we have is we have like a little quiz that helps you figure out if you're more network, more platform, or more security. Based on this, you do the discovery lab that corresponds, and then you're on your own with the map, and I'm just here if you want to ask questions. So I've been running for the last year, I've been running workshops, physical workshops, where people essentially do whichever lab they want. Yeah. And they can just ask questions. And when they're done with a lab, I go to them, I give them the sticker that they've earned, and I ask them how it went. And based on what they liked, I can recommend the next lab. And usually in a matter of like 2, 3, 4 hours, they do somewhere between 2 and 5 labs. And usually they're on the roll. Once they're done with it, most of them will continue at home. And then what we started doing in Chicago and in Paris for KubeCon is in-person events at the booth. So this picture is from KubeCon Paris, and we had like 6 laptops in the booth. And then the idea was what I've just described is we have this page with the quiz. It's a little like survey, and then people enter their information during the survey, and they're redirected directly to the lab, so they don't need to re-enter. They have a session that is ongoing on this laptop, and they can just go and earn and finish the lab and earn stickers as much as they want. And they get a code that is valid for the duration of the conference, so they can come back anytime to the booth and continue with the code.
Nice. Yes, that's really cool. So, I mean, at the end of the day, right, though, there's just a lot of different uses for these things, right? And different times and different values to your customers as well as to you all.
And that's just a bit of it in a way. I had this conversation just last week with one of our sales. He was like, how do you measure the success of your labs? What's the KPI? And I'm like, it's really hard to tell. This is also useful onboarding. When we have engineers onboarding the company, I'm like, hey, do the labs. Yeah. This is the easiest way to see all the features in action. It's used for customers. It's used for lots of different things. So I don't have a single KPI that says, hey, this is the value of the lab. This is what it's useful for.
Yeah.
I'm actually starting to think of it in terms of artifact in some way. In some cases, I had developers working on a feature for a customer. I built the lab to give it to the customer so they could see the feature. And then we iterated on that feature with the customer.
Oh.
And then once the customer is happy with the feature gets released and the lab is ready for marketing. So I'm like, this is an artifact that can be taken all the way from development to marketing to production.
So hold on, you're almost using labs as part of your beta testing, it sounds like, where you're going in and building this out for them to let customers give feedback with it, engage with it in a low stakes environment. And then you're just turning that around so you're good to go and launch your product and you have a lab ready to go.
Yeah, I thought of doing this because I was like, well, the customer doesn't yet have a cluster that they can test on.
Yeah.
Plus upgrading to like beta images is not super easy.
Yeah.
But for me, it's one parameter in my script.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Nice. That is really cool. Honestly, you're the first customer I've heard you say do that. And like I said, y'all are really pushing the bounds over there. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, to me, it's just trying to use Instruqt in a DevOps logic. And what I mean by DevOps is DevOps in a large way, right? Collaboration between developers, operations, marketing. Yeah. Just seeing, what kind of technical artifact can we have to help us collaborate. And this is a great way because, I can have a Git repository, I can have pull requests, I can track who's done what, the versions and so on. So it's a great way to collaborate between teams.
Man, that is really cool. I love to hear that. So with that, let's move on forward to this next piece, which I'm really excited for, which is some of the best practices for course authoring at scale, right? Which obviously you guys have done a phenomenal job here. I know you have a little bit of demo that we can share here as well. Let's talk through maybe a little bit of this at a high level.
Yeah.
Like how are you getting the most out of your content today? And what are some of the things that you've done on the back end to really, make this work for you all?
Well, there's a lot of things. For me, I'm always trying to find how to improve, again, like DevOps principles, it's an ongoing improvement loop, right? Yeah. So it's going through customer feedback, and we get the feedback from Slack in different forms. That can be, at the end of the labs, people can leave a feedback. We get this through the Instruqt API. We send it to Slack. But we also realized that there was a survivor bias in this because people that did not finish the labs, well, we never heard from them because they could not give their opinion.
Yep.
So we started putting a form in the lab so that people could give their opinion or tell if they were stuck. And we send this to the Slack channel as well. And then every time there's little things, every time there's bugs, every time there's feedback, we try to make a pull request and just move forward a little bit.
Yep.
So it's constant improvement on these things. Sometimes it's bigger features. For example, hey, I have to restart the lab every time to get to the exam, and it takes a long time. So implementing something so that people can restore their session, or seeing that people are redoing the same lab 5 times in a row because they haven't seen the email they got from Credly, so they think they haven't gotten the badge. And people get really excited by badges. We get comments from people like, hey, I've done this lab 3 times. Where is my badge? This is the feedback we get.
My bad, guys. It's there. I promise.
Yeah, exactly. So now I have an API I call in the beginning of the lab in my helper that checks if that person already got the badge and shows a dynamic section in the instruction that says you already got this badge. If you want to redo the lab, fine, but just know that you won't get the badge again.
That is really cool, though, because you're making a delightful experience for your customers, right? Like at that point, it's like maybe they didn't realize they already did it. Maybe they didn't realize they already got credit for it. They can see it right there and say, okay, yeah, maybe I do just want to brush up on this, or okay, let's go on to the next one and get that badge, right?
Yeah, it's really, to me, it's really about having the right metrics to remove the friction. Yeah. And it was the same when I talked about the booth, the booth experiences. How do you remove the friction? Originally, we had like a little survey in Chicago, and then people took the survey. And after the survey, we saw that they never started the lab because it was too much of a friction from the survey to the lab. So I thought of how can I remove the friction, in this case, by giving them a 4-letter code that they can enter without re-entering their information. They already got the code. So now you need to redeem the code.
Yep.
It would be stupid not to redeem that code now that you have it.
Yeah.
And once you redeem the code, you're in the lab, you can do it. So I'm always trying to think, how do I remove friction for people to experience the content without being frustrated by this or that?
No, for sure. So with that, do you want to go into and take over the screen share and do a little bit of demo here for us?
Yeah, I can show you a few things. Well, there's the map I can show. So let me share my screen. So originally the idea was the map was this, is that you can see your progress and you can enter the labs. So you can see here the descriptions. And if I click on a lab, it actually goes directly to the lab and it passes my information. So I don't need to re-authenticate.
Nice.
And then one fun thing that happened during a workshop is that I'm like, hey, I was presenting the workshop, and then everybody started doing the labs, and I'm like, what do I put on the beamer that would be fun? And I'm like, hey, it would be fun if I could show people actually doing the labs. So I have this thing taken from the sandboxes at the moment, where you can see everybody doing labs at the moment. So you can see where people are at, which makes for a fun animation. Yeah. And also you can see the amount of people doing the labs. And the fun thing is that it can be a source of inspiration as well. Like, hey, I see this person's doing this. How about I do it as well?
Yeah, can I do it faster? Can I do it better? Can I get that faster? Right?
Yeah, there can be that. I don't know. I never really wanted to encourage people doing things faster. That's one metric I don't want to push, because the goal is for people to understand what they're doing. But yeah,
agreed.
Definitely this kind of thing. Why can I show you? I'll show you. Let me see. Here I can show you some of the GPT queries I've been using, and typically I use a lot of GPT for like scenario. I know the scenario I want to build. I have an idea of what I want, but this can help. Sometimes it brings a little bit of creativity, and then I can build on my own. Usually with GPT, what I do is that I work on roughly the skeleton of what I want to build, and then go in detail into each of the section, and then rework it manually. Obviously, it helps a lot with the content itself, with the commands. It's been quite amazing for this.
So what it's doing there basically is you're just saying, I want to create a course on how to do X with Cilium, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. And then it's giving you those ideas, and you're able to build off of it, iterate, add the human creativity that it's not able to, but it's giving you that starting point. So you don't have to think of it all from the beginning.
Exactly. And sometimes it'll give me, like, if I want to create notes in the beginning of each challenge, some of the notes can be more or less generated. Yep. And the nice thing is, you see here, I'm giving it an example of the format that I expect, and it can see that there's there's a YAML document followed by a markdown. Yeah. So it'll give me the content in that format as well. So I can just copy paste and iterate on this, and then tell it, fix that part, add to this part, and then I can insist to give me the format that I want, and it doesn't do all the work, but it can help me to go much faster in creating content.
And so, just out of curiosity, could you maybe just like zoom in a little bit on that, like deploy an ingress gateway? Like, it's really cool to just see how you're doing that there. I don't know if you can zoom in a little bit more, but
question. I don't think I can zoom in on this.
You can't. That's okay. No worries. I just wanted. Beautiful. So you're literally. Look at that. It's correcting your syntax issue for you, and they're figuring it out for you. Yeah. So you're not wasting all this time on that QA. And so you're really just using this to move faster at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. I'm using it as an assistant to create the content.
Yeah.
One fun thing I've used it as well is this. I have one conversation where the project is give me an emoji every time I give you a topic.
Yep.
Because I find that it really helps to organize the content where every title has an emoji in the beginning of the title. It helps to really distinguish the titles and see where you're at. So I always want to have an emoji in the beginning of each title. So I'm asking it to give me an emoji that fits, and then I just copy paste the emoji. Just much easier than you're looking on Emojipedia.
And it's easy. You don't even. It's like, does that make sense? Yeah, okay, that one makes sense. Go. Done.
Easy, like default BGP timers, for example. I'm like, hey, there you go. So there's different timers here. I can just copy one. I'm just being extremely lazy, right?
No, it's not being lazy though. It's absolutely up-leveling your content and letting you focus on the important things, right? On the, hey, not what emoji makes sense for this thing, but does this actually provide value for my user? Is the content correctly? Is it flowing correctly? And I think this is actually a really interesting question from Tara here. And this is maybe something that you might want to test out with ChatGPT if you're not doing it, but like, do you have labs that'll have an ongoing narrative and story today? And like, are you actually telling a full-on story with these, or is it more of just sequential within your journey of what you need to learn?
Yeah. So no, there's some labs that are boring. I'll be honest. Some of them are boring. Usually the ones I make, I try to have like some. So there's a backstory. The original demo that our CTO, Thomas Graf, gave on Cilium at DockerCon in 2016, I think it was.
Yeah.
Was based on Star Wars. And so when we built the first lab, it was based on that demo because it worked. And so we've been building on this. And every time I try to think, hey, what can I do with Star Wars because it's fun?
Yeah.
So we built scenarios on this and always try to make it fun. Some people like it, some people don't. I've seen feedback sometimes of people saying, hey, I've never seen Star Wars. This is confusing to me. So now we put notes in the labs,
Yeah.
Our labs are usually have a scenario based on Star Wars. If you haven't seen Star Wars, you should be fine. Don't worry, this is nothing. You don't need to understand Star Wars in order to do our labs. So it's like little warning in the beginning.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, this is the mid-journey work. So you can see it adds to the site every time, and then choices on how to implement. So the different choices I had at some point to generate the map that gives an idea with the prompt. And then something that might be more interesting is the CI/CD stuff.
Okay.
So we currently use a monorepo for all our labs, and so we have a tracks repository with all the tracks that we have, and we have sandboxes repository with the presets that we use. And there's an images repository with the base images. And so what I've done, I think a little bit more than a year ago, was to automate as much the processes of releasing changes to labs and new labs.
Yep.
And so we use pull requests for this. So here's an example here where I changed the base image in a preset. And so the CI/CD script will actually detect the sandboxes that were changed here. There's two presets that were changed. So it will push these sandboxes and it will add, it adds a dev suffix to it.
Yeah.
So it calls it, high CPU something -PR573. So now I have a new preset for that pull request. And then it will edit all the tracks that use that preset. Change it to point to that new preset, sorry. And it will push the labs. It will push the tracks, adding the same suffix as well. So here I have a dev track that will be called Cilium BGP-PR, 567, I don't remember.
Yeah.
And then for each of the tracks, it will push them and it will run validation and run the test scripts on it. So for every challenge, it runs the check and then solve and then check again. And so here I can tell that all my tracks have been properly tested. I still need to do manual testing, obviously, because the content might have changed and so on. But at least I know that all the tracks can be played with these new versions of the boxes, and it solves properly.
And I'm assuming you've probably got some kind of alerting that goes with this as well, that if it doesn't actually port over correctly and you get to know that and you can go and start to take a look at it, or you just go into the logs and taking a look at that?
Well, I just look at the logs. I mean, it's a pull request, so I'm actively working on it. I'm not going to merge until it's green, right? So
fair. Yeah, and I mean, not to steal our products team thunder, but we have some pretty cool things that are going to be updated with this system here pretty shortly as well. So excited to see how cool. And at the end of the day, one of the things that I've seen over and over and over again with what we're talking about here in terms of growing scale, right, is really just automation. How can you automate as many of these manual tasks as possible? How can you take out that beginning, really hard guesswork using tools like AI to focus on the most important parts, right? Which is, okay, does this actually still make sense? It runs functionally, but does it work? Is it actually valuable for you? And so,
Yeah, and more than that, releasing labs is one thing. Keeping them up to date is the real challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, every lab is a potential technical debt. I don't want a lab that is outdated. So I try every time there's a new version of Cilium, I try to keep the labs up to date, which means I update the preset, and I want to have automatic testing of all the labs as much as possible so that it doesn't take 2 weeks to release new versions of the lab. Yep. The worst thing would be having outdated demos. This is really what I don't want.
That agreed. And I mean, I think your customers would agree with that as well. One question that's like super related to that actually, before we hop into this, is so when you're merging a PR for your tracks using a developer workflow, if someone's doing a lab, they would lose their progress. How do you manage and deal with that situation?
That's a tough one. And it has to do with that's something I'm not super happy with Instruqt with, to be honest. It's the IDs and checksums, right? But I understand why this is there. It's essentially for statistics tracking. Yeah. So originally I used to remove the IDs from all my code because it's problematic. Because when I push a new version of the track, if the IDs are there, it would I don't know. There was a problem with this. I'm generally not a big fan of having data in the code, right, in the specification. So I had removed the IDs. Now I put back the IDs, so I have the production IDs in the code. Yeah. So that when I merge the PR, it will actually push to the production lab. Now, most of the time, if these are small changes, it won't impact the current sessions because the IDs haven't changed.
Yep.
If it's a big change, it might. With the amount of people that we have running labs, it hardly ever impacts people. I mean, I won't have like 20 people being impacted unless I do a release during a workshop, which I try to avoid.
Yeah, which I think everyone tries to avoid. I mean, we even do that for our customers, right? Like if you're doing a big workshop, we want you to tell us because we don't want to change anything, right? And so I think that, that's a really good point. It's all about just like, planning out like, okay, we don't do a lot of track. There's not a lot of people playing tracks at this time every day. Maybe we should push updates then. So I think that makes sense. But appreciate you sharing the transparency with it and giving us some answers. So
I wanted to show here, this is typically the form that we put in every challenge for people to give feedback during the lab. I think Instruqt will have this eventually. I've talked about it with your team.
Yep.
So this person reported a typo in the content and described the issue. So with this, I can immediately open a pull request, and the pull request just changes it fixes the typo, and then based on this, it will deploy the development version of that track, and then it will run the checks, and I can see that this is working, and so I can merge. I'm just waiting for one of my colleagues to review, but I kept it open so that I can show it today.
Makes sense. And it also talks about that checks and balances. It's a good thing you have a review process in there as well. But it makes a ton of sense, and it's like more eyes on it, the better. So with that, we've got another really cool question from Tara here. So interested in the part you mentioned about displaying dynamic instructions if someone already has the badge. At what point does that happen? When they click on the lab from the learning path, or before the lab actually loads? Like they want to know more about how you're actually doing that, I guess.
You know what? I'll show you when this happens. I'll just start a lab. There you go. This is my lab starting. So it shows as well. One thing I do on all our tracks is I use CSS on the main node here to customize it. I wanted to have like a branded slide in the beginning. I don't do this on every track. There's some fun things you can do with CSS actually. Yep. So I have this slide on every one, and you can even do like animation with CSS. Like this is kind of fun.
Nice.
And so when I start here, you see here I have, this is interesting. It says you already earned this badge. You already earned and accepted this badge on the 13th of March. And if I click on it, I can see my badge on Credly because I have this information. So obviously you can feel free to redo the lab. You just won't be earning. And then there's the process tracking, which tells me that my tracking is being processed. So if I had stopped the lab in the middle in a previous session, it would show me a button to actually restore my progress. So this is simply done. I have a script that runs in the beginning of the lab. I call it Lab Assistant, and I run it in the beginning, and it uses some credentials that are passed in the setup script. Yeah. And then this generates a file here with my information. This is obviously information that is only accessible within the lab, and you can't retrieve other people's information.
Yep.
There's a fun thing about this, but I don't think we have time to talk about it. And then based on this, Lab Assistant uses the agent comment to export variables. So it exports one variable for this section and one variable for this section. And then I use the variables, so it's runtime variables, and I use them in the content dynamically.
Nice. That is super, super cool. And like, this is where I was talking about in the beginning of this. Like, as we're wrapping, we have a few more questions, but we're going to have to take those offline because we're running out of time. But like, this is where you can really see like some of the things y'all are doing to push the bounds of what you can do with Instruqt. Like, it's so cool to see. I mean, you've just got a nice badge posted up right over there, and it knows you already have it. And that's so great. I mean, I'm even seeing like people in the comments saying, this is so awesome. Like, it's rare that you see things like that. So I'm very impressed with that. And, as we're wrapping up here, there's a few questions that we weren't able to get to. We're going to take those out into the chat. We're going to be able to go and we'll follow up with you guys individually, make sure you get your answers on those. Like, I saw a few like very product specific questions. So I'll make sure someone on CS or our product team gets connected with you all. But at the end of the day, Raphaël, I just really wanted to thank you. Like, this is such cool content. This was so much fun for me to get in and honestly just like nerd out and see what's possible and the cool stuff that you're building. Just really want to thank you for spending the time today and kind of, jumping in here with us. It's much appreciated. And I mean, people in here are telling us how amazing it is and how much they appreciate it and thanking you right now in the comments. So, it was greatly appreciated from everyone around.
Thanks. That was fun.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we will be seeing you soon. If you guys have any other questions, please let us know. You can follow up at hello@instruqt.com. That will all come to me. I promise. I will make sure you get routed where you want to go. And if you had a question we didn't get to, we will come back to you with you on that here soon. So thanks again, Raphaël, and everyone have a good rest of your day.
I'll just drop one thing. If you want to test the lab again, there's isovalent.com/labs.
Yep.
And it's accessible to anyone.
And the links are also in all of the slides, which will be available to you all here at the, we send out the recording. So you'll be good to go. Thank you all so much. Have a good day.